one personal services. All of the staff, you had to be over 18 to worship the church, so to speak. But the gist of it was it was hedonism. It was pleasure for the body. Okay, with this massage parlor church, I had brought this up within the context of one of the ways to read the Constitution. Oh. Do you remember what the way was?
It wasn't original intent. It wasn't original intent.
It was original.
Oh, it was original intent.
Okay, original intent struck down one religious practice, but it upheld another one. Okay, where it could.
It struck down polygamy.
Struck down polygamy. Why did they say that?
Because it said that Mormonism wasn't a religion when the Constitution was made.
Right.
So therefore, it wasn't supported. Or
so therefore, it should not be protected. Yeah. And when you think about it, were the Universalists around? Was the massage parlor church around back then?
No.
No. So should it be allowed?
No.
Based on original intent, no, but it is because those interpretations have changed over time. So when you read through that article, really about the first page and a quarter of it is what you need to pay attention to. And the bottom line is that they lay out pleasure for the body, they lay out the oils and the rooms and the fetishes and all these kinds of things. They lay out the all-girl staff and it's over 18 and all these kinds of things. And then I believe in there as well, they lay out the idea of Jesus protect us from your followers kind of a thing. We believe in the absolute interpretation of the First Amendment, meaning you respect our values and we respect yours, but don't you step on our values because they're different than yours kind of a thing. What was the felons article? And this one was another one from Carolina, the young felons.
This was the 17 and 18 year olds? Is that what this was?
Believe it was 16 and 17. Believe it was 16, but I may be wrong on that. We'll look.
No,
what's that?
It was 17 and 18.
It was, okay, let's go with 17 and 18 for exam purposes. Yeah. Okay, so what was the story with this?
It said that kids who committed certain felonies.
Okay, like what kind of felonies? Be specific.
Burglary.
Gun.
Wasn't it guns? Or gun.
Yeah.
Okay,
Guns.
what kind? Gun? What?
Carry
No,
guns
carry
to
gun,
school.
yeah.
What kind of guns?
Pistols.
No,
Concealed guns.
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of felonies are we talking about? Breaking and entering, concealed weapons on school grounds. What's the word?
Is it nonviolent?
Nonviolent felonies. If you're a nonviolent felon and you're age 16 or 17, what was North Carolina debating that they could actually do?
Clear record.
Yeah, basically they want to clear your record. And what did you have to do in order to get your record expunged?
You had to go to 2 years. Community service and
100 hours.
100 hours of community service, 2 years probation. So basically, number one, you're going to have to serve the time that you got from the sentence. There's no way around that. Number two, you're going to have to do 2 years of probation. And number three, you're going to have to do 100 hours of community service, along with counseling, you know, from the judge and whatnot, the appropriate officials. Bottom line, after you do that, that record is gone. How many times would they do this?
Once.
They would do this one time. And why did they want to do this?
Because everybody needs a second chance.
Give a chance. What do you mean give a chance?
Because they couldn't get jobs.
Okay, they couldn't get jobs. If you check that box that says, "Are you have you committed a felony?" I told you we typically would throw those away, but we wouldn't say that's why we didn't hire you. What's that?
Couldn't go to school.
You couldn't go to school. Why couldn't you go to school?
Because
you can't have a felony.
They wouldn't give money to the
you wouldn't get federal aid with a felony on your record. What was the third big thing?
Military.
Military. You couldn't join the military. And if you can't go to school, you can't join the military, and you can't get a job, what are you likely to do?
Go back to jail.
You're likely to go right back to committing the crimes. And that's why they were doing this. How many states at the point when Carolina was considering this already allowed you to forgive a felony, nonviolent felony? 49. North Carolina was the last state to allow this. The last state to allow this. Let's jump into Chapter 2. What do you got from the terms for Chapter 2? Anybody at all? Declaration of Independence we covered, and I believe, is this the one where it's got budget? No, budget activity is Chapter 3. Scratch off budget activity in Chapter 3 because we didn't do that. So, and I'll fix that on the study guide. What have you got from Chapter 2 though? 1808. Okay, there were two provisions in the Constitution that dealt specifically, actually there were more than two, but there were two big ones that we talked about that dealt with slavery. One of them was 1808, and then of course there was a second one. What was that 1808 provision dealing with slavery?
Abolish the slave trade.
Abolish the slave trade. What's the significance of 1808?
Would it be the date that would be abolished? It had a 20-year
Yeah, go ahead.
To it, so that time to get ready for it.
That's exactly what it was. 1789 was when the Constitution became in effect. George Washington became president in 1789. Founding fathers basically said we can't eliminate slavery, we're not going to pass a Constitution. So what we will do is we're going to go ahead and make 1808 the year to abolish the slave trade. So from 1789 to 1808, you folks that have slaves need to get used to the fact that you're not going to have them forever. You need to make arrangements. And if you remember when we were doing with ERA, when they were talking about salaries, gave 2 years. The idea was that you're not going to dump a huge economic burden on people immediately, but you're going to give them time to prepare for it. And slavery was been around. I mean, it was dependent, the economies were, so give them 20 years and they'll be able to move forward. What happened? The slave trade ended, but what happened?
It sped up.
It accelerated. Why did it accelerate?
Because they wanted to bring more slaves in before they reached that time, and they also began breeding.
Yeah, that's exactly what it
But in
was.
certain countries, some states didn't. Some states didn't agree with slavery, so they didn't use slaves at all.
Yeah.
I think it was the southern states that used.
Yeah, it always goes back to the South. I know. Yeah. Southern United States, Chechnya.
Because they said that we want more slaves because we need them.
Okay. Basically what happened is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And indeed, they did ban the slave trade, but instead of weaning themselves from slavery, the southern plantation owners actually accelerated the process. They brought in more and more and more and more and more slaves, and then they began to breed them so they would be able to continue slavery instead of it actually dying off.
Because it wasn't it if they already were, if they were already here, it wasn't, then you couldn't bring any more. In 1808, if that were to happen, wouldn't that stop from bringing any
Right, that's
future
what it
ones
was.
in? But if they already had them and they were working and had them on the plantations, then it didn't.
Yeah, that's right. 1808 was key because it ended the slave trade. It didn't end slavery.
Slavery.
It ended the slave trade. But the thought was that slavery would die off, but the southern plantation owners weren't exactly idiots. What else? Okay, what was the other provision?
Was it 3?
3/5. What was 3/5?
That a slave was worth 3/5 of votes.
5 slaves equals 3 people, or 1 slave equals 3/5 of a person. Why was this fraction important?
Because the northern states didn't want the slaves to be one whole person because the southern states had a lot more slaves, and the southern states had a lot more slaves. So that means they would have more people in the voting.
They would get more representation in the Congress. Okay, and then 3/5 for the southern states.
'Cause they
Why?
didn't- Because of tax
This is-
purposes, they were going to get taxed a higher rate because they had more.
Exactly.
A bigger population.
Exactly, and the northern states would be able to use more of the southern tax dollars within the federal government. There were a number of other fractions that we talked about from Chapter 2. What are the other fractions? Well, this is
9/13.
3/5.
I was going to say 9.
9/13.
What was 9/13?
That was
9 states.
9 states had to
to
ratify.
pass a bill.
Yeah.
To
9
pass-
states to pass a bill?
No, to
Nine
ratify
states.
the Constitution.
9 states to ratify the Constitution. What was 13/13?
It was unanimous.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. What was unanimous? What had to be unanimous?
Oh, before when they first started off, then every state had to agree on everything.
Under the Articles
It
of
was a
Confederation,
confederation.
it had to be unanimous. So that's 9/13, 13/13, 3/5. There's some more.
2/3.
What was 2/3?
You have to have 2/3 vote to pass anything through Congress or something. I don't know. I just threw it out there.
Was 1313 killed when they actually ratified the Constitution? That was just
Yeah,
for the
that's right.
articles.
That's right. Some people argued that the Constitution was illegally passed because it should have been 1313 and it took effect before. Yeah.
So once the Constitution was passed, it was always 913, so no longer 1313.
Actually, no. Once the Constitution got passed, that 9/13 was just that one thing.
That's what I thought. And then it was
Yeah,
back to
and then it was
13.
just a majority vote.
Oh.
Then
Oh,
it was just a
majority.
majority vote. Yeah. Okay, so what was
Hold on.
2/3?
Isn't like 2/3 for like when a veto happens, like when the president vetoes something?
Okay,
You-
Congress can override a presidential veto with a 2/3 vote, but there's something else. Oh, it
In
doesn't.
order to get rid of an article, in order to get rid of one of the articles, you need 2/3 vote.
No amendments. You have to pass a new amendment.
In order to propose
Yeah,
an
a new
amendment,
amendment,
you
you have to
needed a
have
2/3 vote.
And
In
they-
order to propose an amendment, you needed a 2/3 vote by both houses of Congress. In order to override a presidential veto, 2/3 vote by both houses of Congress. 3/4.
You need that's how many states you need to pass it actually, right?
You need to
You-
pass
to pass an amendment.
pass a
Yeah,
constitutional
an
amendment. You need 38 of the 50 states or 3/4. Absolutely. What else you got from Chapter 2?
What about divided government?
Scratch divided government.
Yeah.
Scratch it. We haven't talked about it, I don't think.
The full faith and credit clause.
Okay, full faith and credit clause dealt with 3 things. Full faith and credit clause dealt with 3 things. I gave you 3 examples of this. What was it, and then what were the 3 examples?
Wasn't full faith and credit meaning that any government document or marriage or thing I have in one state, in any state that I go to is always gonna be valid because they had the faith that I did it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any binding legal document that you get from one state is going to be recognized by the other states. And can you give me some examples of this? Some that work and some that don't?
Money. If you owe money
No.
to the bank.
If you owe money. Okay.
No, you said
There were some real specific
oh,
ones.
you said
If you have a felony in one state, it's good for another state.
Yeah, exactly. If you have a criminal conviction and you leave the state where you've been, or if you're wanted in a state and you leave that state and go to another one, if they catch you, the full faith and credit clause will basically require them to send you back. There are some exceptions to this, but the bottom line is full faith and credit. You've got this
Oh.
outstanding warrant on you. They would be required to honor that warrant. Yes.
wasn't like gay marriages one of the things that didn't apply to that? When
Okay, there was one example of marriage that would apply, though.
regular marriage, like when
Regular marriage, yeah. If Adam and Eve get married, and they get married in Maryland, then they're going to be married in any state that they go to. If Adam and Steve get married in Massachusetts, it's going to be recognized there, but it won't be recognized in other states that don't recognize it. So yes, full faith and credit would recognize